modern pop culture has always been fascinated by portrayals of the future. There are countless movies, books, video games, and even music which are based on a future timeline. With such a vast domain, we can expect there to be multiple portrayals of the future. All these portrayals can be roughly classified on whether they are successful, happy futures or failed and depressing ones. The former is the utopian vision, while the latter is the dystopian one. Although there are some storylines that do not perfectly fit into these categories, but they do not really matter in today's video. A utopian future is a happy, clean, and perfect future, something which we all want to achieve. While a dystopian one is basically a failed society which is filled with hatred and injustice. Looking at both of these visions, one may assume that both may be interesting topics for media. There should be many utopian and dystopian fiction. However, the catch is that in our pop culture, there is a huge bias towards dystopian plots. There are nearly an infinite number of dystopian movies, books, video games, songs and references, but not many utopian ones. Try to name at least 5 pieces of media which have a utopian genre. If you can't, then that's fine, because there simply isn't much utopian fiction. Does this directly correlate to the fact that the people aren't really interested in this genre? This shouldn't be the case, especially when this is the more optimistic one, and the reality which we all want. Or is there a deeper reason to this? Well, if we analyze this, we find various factors for this. When we look into the basic concept of video games, it basically involves a protagonist who has to face the challenges put forward by the antagonist. The antagonist has to initially be more powerful, allowing the protagonist to slowly rise up and defeat him in the end. This process makes up the main plot of the story, and all the emotions, tension, and development is what makes the audience watch it. The protagonist is the main character of the story. However, the antagonist may not always be a person or entity. It can also be replaced by some other form. Basically anything that poses a negative force to the protagonist. This can be a financial problem, an event, plain emotions, or the surrounding itself, which takes us to dystopian cities. Dystopias can also be formed to show how the antagonist is more powerful, since he is a negative force and must be challenging for the hero. In both ways, the dystopian genre is a very good support for the antagonist. However, for a utopian genre, we will have to give the upper hand to the protagonist, which basically portrays him to be more powerful. This almost completely eliminates the tension that is to be created in a movie and is not very appealing to the audience. If there are no problems to be faced by the protagonist, there is simply nowhere for the plot to go. No fights, no tough paths, no issues for the protagonist. Since the utopian vision is simply against the main idea of most storylines, it is not very common. Our societies, systems, and even daily lives are filled with problems. No matter at which point in the social hierarchy one is, he has to face challenges. Problems are a fundamental part of reality, and this is why they are so crucial to a plot, because they make it compelling and relatable for the audience. Most of the population lives in places where there is constant political conflict, economic tension, and mental pressure, which is why the lives of countless are filled with hardships. This makes the people relate to dystopian lives and gain interest in it. This is why there's a literally me trend which is tagged in dystopian lives. The riots, depression, or poverty faced by the protagonist in a story is related to the real life of most of the masses. Watching these stories gives people a sense of comfort, as it shows how they are not alone in these situations. Meanwhile, there are places which are safe, clean, rich, and have very less conflict. But these are fractionally less compared to the opposite. Hence, very few would find it relatable, making utopian fiction even less appealing. However, our lives are not extremely failed or bad, no matter how much we try to portray it as. If you're able to watch this on a device in a warm home, you have a relatively better life than most of the population. So another reason why we focus more on dystopias is a psychological property of the human mind called the negativity bias. Negativity bias refers to our proclivity to attend to, learn from, and use negative information far more than positive information. This is why bad news, bad comments, or bad incidents last more in our minds compared to the good ones. This is because, like a software, humans are pattern discovery machines. When something stands out like a threat, our mind highlights it. This psychological property makes us focus more on dystopias and their consequences, hence making them more iconic. Dystopias are a good technique to make your story memorable. Another psychological factor may be that even though utopias may be aesthetically pleasing, with plants, clean air, and open areas, dystopian genres like cyberpunk are also aesthetically pleasing for many, because many people of newer generations are born in cities and surrounded by technology, while almost all of the dystopian places are cities and involve technology. This makes the aesthetic relatively better in the eyes of the people and somewhat recognizable. And again, bringing it back to the topic of being more relatable to the real life of most of the people. Still, there are some pieces of utopian fiction, like the films Tomorrowland and Back to the Future, with books like Equality by Edward Bellamy. More utopian fiction may also be a positive force on today's and tomorrow's society. Redfern John Barrett, sci-fi author and idealist, believes that creating utopias in fiction doesn't just inspire people, but also brings these utopias closer to reality. No work of dystopian fiction has ever stopped the scenarios it portrays from happening, he argues. 1984 did not prevent the surveillance state, and Blade Runner didn't hinder corporate destruction of the environment. Barrett feels that while dystopia is reactive, utopia is proactive. If we present hopeful futures, then I genuinely believe we increase their likelihood. Barrett theorizes that inspiration is a powerful force for change, and we can already see how fictional utopias have inspired real-life innovation. There is no better example of this than Star Trek, perhaps the most prolific utopia, and certainly the one with the most longevity. In the 50 years since Trek's debut, the franchise shows and films have inspired dozens of inventions, from computer tablets to 3D printers. But in creating utopian fiction, there emerges a fundamental problem. A lot of science fiction takes a shortcut in creating utopia, using some cataclysmic event to wipe the state clean and start again. Both Star Trek and the novel Woman at the Edge of Time use World War III to achieve this, which is certainly a pessimistic origin story for a better society. Other authors like Ursula Le Guin build utopias on different planets to escape humanity's history and baggage. When creating a perfect world, there are many dangerous pitfalls to trip writers up, glossing over societal inequalities, ascribing to an exclusive ideology, or just straight up whitewashing the future. Many utopian shows have given utopian films a bad name. Even in real life, the leaders who've created the harshest of societies are the ones who wanted to build a utopia. If we are able to create a fictional utopia, how to achieve this has to be part of the story, or else their inspirational nature is lost. If all we see is an onslaught of depressing news as the world goes to hell with a handbasket, we might give in to the idea that a better tomorrow really is just a fairy tale. Yet, in such a bleak reality, hope is radical. And the more we dare to dream about our own utopias, then we might just be inspired to stop the end of the world, as impossible a dream as that may seem to be.